Good morning from Metro Manila, the Philippines, Southeastern Asia. The Alpine Central European nation of Austria is now in a political crisis yet again. Then again, there have been a number of such political crises in that country since the 1990s at least. This time it involves a controversial video filmed, maybe secretly, on the Spanish holiday resort island of Ibiza, where the populist right-wing and Eurosceptic and strongly anti-Islam and anti-immigration Austrian Freedom Party's leader and the vice chancellor or deputy prime minister of the current right-wing or center-right political federal government, Mr. Heinz Christian Strache, was having a controversial conversation with a woman and one or two men, apparently Russian agents. The video surfaced yesterday on May the 18th, 2019, and already on the same day, the Austrian federal chancellor or prime minister and the basically Christian democratic oriented Austrian People's Party's leader, Sebastian Kurz, announced that the coalition must end and that new elections have to be held in the second half of this year. The Austrian head of state, federal president Alexander van der Bellen, agreed. These will be already the second early elections in Austria in a row. The previous federal parliamentary elections were held there in October 2017. In Austria, normally the federal parliament's lower and directly elected house, or chamber, the National Council, is elected for 5 years. It has 183 deputies. They are elected by a system of proportional representation from 43 districts, which means that at least most of Austria's 9 federal states have multiple districts. There is a federal vote threshold of 4% for the parties. However, it is theoretically possible for a party to get at least one of the fringe or remaining mandates in the Austrian National Council from one of the 43 electoral districts, even if its federal vote slips below 4%. Yeah. So on May the 18th, 2019, Heinz Christian Strache announced that he would resign as the Austrian Freedom Party's leader and vice chancellor amid the Ibiza affair. An ongoing political scandal in Austria involving Mr. Strache, then Mr. Johann Gudenus, a deputy leader of the Austrian Freedom Party, and the Austrian Freedom Party in general. It was triggered by a compromat, a video of a July 2017 meeting in Ibiza, Spain, published on May the 17th, 2019. So thank you for the correction, Wikipedia. Appearing to show Strache and Gudenus discussing underhanded political practices. In the video, both politicians appeared receptive to proposals by a woman posing as the niece of a Russian oligarch, discussing providing the Freedom Party positive news coverage in return for business contracts. At the time, Austria was headed towards another early federal election. And of course, we know that the 2016 Austrian presidential elections dragged over several months. Originally, they were held in April and May 2016. On the first round of the presidential election, there was a political upset because the two traditional ruling parties, the Christian Democratic People's Party and the center-left Social Democrats, saw their presidential candidates eliminated. The populist and right-wing and nationalist Freedom Party had its candidate, the Austrian Federal Council's second or third deputy speaker, Mr. Norbert Hofer, win a plurality against the Green Party's candidate, Alexander van der Bellen. The two therefore qualified for the runoff or second round election that was held in May 2016, which according to the official results, van der Bellen won very narrowly, I think with 50.3% of the vote. However, the Freedom Party launched a challenge at the start of July, just before van der Bellen was to take office as the successor to the outgoing president, Heinz Fischer, who was stepping down in early July 2016, having served his two constitutionally allotted terms as the Austrian federal president. The appeal was successful, or maybe it was launched already in June, and then the Austrian Constitutional Court or Supreme Court invalidated the second round's election results due to irregularities, such as the announcement of results before the returns were in, or the handling of ballots by people who were not authorized election officials, or something similar. Anyway, to put a long story short, the second round was then was repeated in early December 2016, and in that repeated second round, Mr. van der Bellen received a clear majority of votes, I think over 53%. Maybe many Austrian voters simply did not feel comfortable having a populist right-wing federal president because, according to the Austrian political and constitutional traditions, the federal president is supposed to be a non-partisan figure, at least in the sense that he or she does not openly favor any particular political party or coalition, and is supposed to symbolize the ideal of a national unity. On paper, Austria is a semi-presidential republic because the federal president has some important reserve powers, including the right to nominate theoretically whomever he or she chooses as the federal chancellor or prime minister. In practice, however, the Austrian federal president will only appoint politicians who are likely to command a working majority in the Austrian National Council as federal chancellors. He or she also has the right to dissolve independently the National Council and call early federal parliamentary elections. However, in practice, he or she will only do so on the advice of the federal chancellor or of the cabinet, or occasionally of the National Council itself. He or she probably also has the right to veto laws, but I'm not sure if that right has been used for decades. But in practice, Austria is a parliamentary republic where the federal president normally stays out of the daily politics and leaves that largely to the federal chancellor and to the other cabinet ministers and to the members of the National Council. The Federal Council, which is the Austrian federal parliament's upper house, has limited constitutional powers. It only is truly an important second chamber of federal parliament if there are constitutional amendments, because for those ones, its approval is also needed. And especially if there are constitutional amendments that would either expand or reduce the 9 federal states' powers. The 9 state legislatures elect indirectly its members, and the Federal Council has about 1/3 of the members of the National Council. And then already in the aftermath of the original Austrian presidential elections, Werner Faymann resigned as the federal chancellor to be replaced by Christian Rentz, I think. Both of them are social democrats. And then, in order to resolve the political crisis in the so-called Grand Coalition of Social Democrats and the People's Party, early elections were announced for October 2017. And as I said in an earlier video, the Austrian People's Party won a plurality in those elections. The Social Democrats finished just one seat ahead of the Freedom Party, with the other parties trailing. Anyway, in that Ibiza video, Mr. Strache and Mr. Gudenus also hinted at corrupt political practices involving other wealthy donors for the Freedom Party in Europe and elsewhere. The video also revealed the party's authoritarian intents to suppress the freedom of the press in Austria and replacing it with a compliant media. Well, isn't that quite much what US President Donald Trump in his Twitter rants seems to prefer? He definitely prefers the Fox News, which is basically a Republican or Republican-leaning television news channel over, for example, the CNN, ABC, CBS, MSNBC, and so forth, which have been notably critical of his presidency. Especially they have criticized him over the many lies, although many of them are basically repetitions of the same lies and misleading statements which he has made during the past nearly 4 years since July 2015. With a view to turning Austria's largest circulation paper, Kronen Zeitung, into a mouthpiece of the Austrian Freedom Party. The scandal caused the Austrian governing coalition's collapse and the announcement of the 2019 Austrian legislative election. On May the 17th, 2019, Der Spiegel, which is a left-leaning German weekly magazine, and the Süddeutsche Zeitung, a southern German daily newspaper, reported that in 2017, Strache and Gudenus had been offered electoral support by a woman posing as the niece of a Russian oligarch whose name, probably made-up name, was Igor Makarov. The source of the allegations was a video secretly recorded at a rented villa on Ibiza in July 2017, which apparently showed Strache agreeing to offer the woman assistance in acquiring business contracts in Austria in exchange for rendering support in the then upcoming October 2017 Austrian legislative election. 5 people participated in the videotaped meeting, according to the German news media, which had examined the tapes but had not released the full recordings. Those persons included Mr. Strache, a woman who said she was the niece of a Russian oligarch and interpreter, the woman's companion, another Freedom Party official, Mr. Gudenus, who appeared to have set up the meeting, and Mr. Gudenus' wife, Tajana. The persons spoke in English, German, and Russian. In the footage, according to Der Spiegel, Strache told the putative or supposed investor that he had visited Russia multiple times and that he had met advisors of Russia's President Vladimir Putin, intending to forge a strategic collaboration. He agreed with the woman's suggestion that she might help his party in the then upcoming 2017 federal parliamentary elections by buying the mass circulation tabloid the Kronen Zeitung. Mr. Strache further suggested that she donate funds through their party associations that would be difficult to audit. During the video footage's conversation, Strache said that he had contracts with Israelis who opposed the left-wing politics in Israel, and that he had been invited to China to promote business between Austria and China. He also appeared to have said that the companies Glock, Guess MBH, and Novomatic and investors Heidi Goes Horten and René Benko had made large donations to both the Freedom Party and the People's Party using non-profit associations, an allegation that all have denied. Strache also said that Mr. Hans-Peter Hazel-Steiner, a major shareholder of the construction company Strabag, would no longer receive commissions by the Austrian federal government. Der Spiegel and Süddeutsche Zeitung reported that they did not know the identity or motives of the woman who recorded the video and provided it to them. In the video, Strache is recorded to have said he wanted to build a media landscape like the authoritarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban's in Hungary. Context of the Ibiza setup. Der Spiegel and Süddeutsche Zeitung, who obtained and analyzed parts of the video over 6 hours, maintained that they did not know the identity and motives of those who made the video and provided it to them. The meeting had been set up by Gudenus, who had had several prior meetings with the woman in Vienna. Gudenus also provided some of the translation during the meeting, as he speaks Russian. At some point of the meeting, Gudenus says to the suspicious Strache, "No, it's not a trap." The highly professional setup of the apparent trap, the amount of time and money allocated preparing and realizing it, allowed journalists from Der Standard and Die Welt to make speculations. Die Welt, at least, is a major German newspaper, and it is left-leaning compared to the more centrist or right-leaning Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung. It might be. Yeah, Die Zeit is the major left-leaning German daily newspaper. I'm not sure about Die Welt, but I can click it. It's a German national daily newspaper. Okay, so it's conservative. Okay, sorry for the mistake. And then Der Standard is an Austrian daily newspaper published in Vienna. And it is a socially liberal newspaper. Over the possible intention or intentions of the source, which had held back the video for 2 years, publishing it only shortly before the 2019 European Union parliamentary elections, which, as we know, will occur from May the 23rd to May the 26th, 2019. So in the second half of the following week. On May the 18th, 2019 at 12 o'clock Eastern European time, or is it sent? Okay. Heinz Christian Strache officially announced that he would resign as Vice Chancellor of Austria and Chairman of the Freedom Party at a press conference. He stated that he had offered the Federal Chancellor Sebastian Kurz his resignation already at 11 o'clock that day. Shortly before attending the press conference, Kurz had accepted his resignation and had advised Federal President Alexander Van der Bellen to formally dismiss him. Strache nominated the party's former presidential candidate Norbert Hofer, the current infrastructure and traffic minister, as well as the Freedom Party's deputy chairman, as his successor for the office of vice chancellor and party leader. The Freedom Party Presidium is slated to convene today on May the 19th and officially appoint Hofer as the acting and designate party leader. At the press conference, Strache portrayed the recording of the video as an illegal and immoral act by the press and announced that he would take any legal action possible against the organizers, recorders, and publishers of the video. However, he later admitted and recognized his wrongdoing. Furthermore, Strache wishes for the Kurz cabinet to remain. Shortly after Strache's announced resignation, Mr. Gudenus also officially announced that he would resign from his political positions. At 7 p.m. On May the 19th, 2019 Eastern European Time, Federal Chancellor Kurz officially announced that the current coalition government would end and informed the media and the public that he had asked Federal President van der Bellen to initiate new legislative elections as early as possible, which means that they could already happen, for example, this July or August, so in the mid or late summer 2019. So, after this lengthy introduction, according to Article 26 and 27, or Articles 26 and 27 of the Austrian Federal Constitution, the National Council must be convened by the President no later than 30 days after the most recent election. Anyway, elections would not be held until mid-July 2019 at the latest, but would be unlikely to be held during the summer, thus making an election in September or October more likely, possibly coinciding with state elections in Austria's least populous federal state, Vorarlberg, on the Swiss-Liechtensteinian border on September the 22nd. Anyway, according to the opinion polls, it seems that the People's Party is headed for another plurality. In 7 recent opinion polls found on the English language Wikipedia, conducted between March the 28th and May the 15th, 2019, the People's Party would get between 33 and 34% of the vote. The Social Democrats would finish second with between 24 and 28% of the vote. The Freedom Party would remain third with between 22 and 24% of the vote. The Liberal Neos Party would get between 7 and 9% of the vote. The mainstream Greens would return to parliament after a 2-year absence with between 5 and 6% of the vote. They narrowly fell below the 4% vote threshold in the October 2017 Austrian federal parliamentary elections because of the breakaway Peter Pilz list, now called the Jetzt Party, which, according to these opinion polls, would lose its seats, receiving only 2% of the vote. The other parties and groups would get between 1 and 3% of the vote.